Good morning, everyone. I know it's going to be a fluid morning with people coming in and out. It's a busy schedule today. So again, we really appreciate your time in being here, sharing insight with us. And I know, people continually come out and listen and share their information. But I'm just going to kick us off just so we could keep on time because I know people have a real busy schedule. So first of all, good morning. For those of you that I don't know, which I don't think there are many at all in this room, my name is Laura Duchessi, and I'm President and CEO of the Scranton Area Community Foundation. We're here along with the City of Scranton to have these important listening sessions, and we appreciate the fact that you're sharing your time with us in this very busy season of December. But, we feel that it'll enable us all and all of our collaborative stakeholders to have additional information necessary for us to all be able to hit the ground running in 2023, have the most up-to-date information. So as a community foundation, we enact upon our three pillars of being a charitable partner, a catalyst and a convener, and a grant maker and partner to nonprofit organizations. And our goal is to create charitable connections to enhance the quality of life for all people in northeastern Pennsylvania through organized philanthropy. In today's community listening session and tomorrow's community listening session entitled Elevating Voices for Community Solutions seeks to do just that. By convening community partners and stakeholders, we hope to find collaborative solutions, community-based opportunities to address key topics outlined in the City of Scranton's Strategic Economic Development Plan. And this economic development plan was created to guide the city in focusing on various strategic areas over the next 10 years. The listening sessions held today and tomorrow will be focusing on 6 of those strategic areas, including industry growth, creating a climate for industry growth, diverse talent, community pride, affordable and quality housing, infrastructure, and diversity, equity, and inclusion. And in addition, we've added a 7th focus area to these listening sessions, emergency services, to help further identify, for those that are already working deeply on this issue, some of the urgent needs and priorities that are continuing to arise, and in some cases increase in need, and which have significant quality of life implications for so many in the communities that we serve. So today, we'll hear from a variety of professionals whose work covers these focus areas. These presenters will highlight the current needs, barriers, challenges, and areas of opportunity within these spaces. Equipped with this information, we believe that various stakeholders and organizations present and those that will get this information via ECTV, via online or in written form can come together, form partnerships, share knowledge and resources to address these needs. So I want to thank you again for joining us during this very busy time, but we know that it will bear fruit. So with that, I'm going to introduce Maggie Martinelli, who's going to go through some specific housekeeping issues.
Good morning, everybody. Thank you all so much for being here. We understand how busy everyone's schedule is this time of year. We know it's not easy to gather. So we just want to send our appreciation to everybody who came today and is willing to speak. And please know that today's session is being recorded. ECTV is here, and we're thankful to them for recording today's sessions. They're going to be here today and tomorrow. So if you have to drop in and out, we completely understand. We understand how busy you are. And so if you want to, for those who are speaking, if you want to speak and then drop out, we completely understand. Just a couple things to keep in mind, though, since we are recording. If you want to have conversations, we invite you to do so. But if you can please, use the pre-function area outside the ballroom to have conversations. We just don't want it interrupting the mics and making sure we're picking up and hearing everything clearly. But please help yourself throughout the day. There's water and coffee. There's breakfast items, so feel free to help yourself to that. It's not that you can't move around, but just if you want to have conversations with one another, understanding that you talk quite a bit with each other, that just if you can do so outside, just to make sure we can all hear okay today. So it's going to be kind of rapid fire as far as the speaking goes. We're going to try to keep to a strict schedule to make sure we can get out of here all on time and keep everything on a timely basis. Dana Hunter, who is in the blue right there, she is going to be helping to keep time, and she's going to be holding up signs to just kind of give you a little bit of a warning of when your time's coming to a close. So just keep an eye on her. She'll be trying to alert you to make sure that we're kind of sticking to our time frame. We've asked everybody has a 10-minute slot. We've asked all of our speakers to have their presentation portion to about 6 minutes, and then we're going to allow time for question and answer. So if you have any questions, because we do want to make sure it gets onto the mic, we would ask that you use the microphone up here right by where Dana is sitting. So please, head to the mic and you can feel free to ask any questions that you may have. Some of our, Laura and Kathy, our grants and scholarships manager, are here. They're going to have maybe some questions as well. And we're going to be joined as well by several members of the city and some other important stakeholders. But the important thing is, again, we're recording. So this will be available and shared widely so that everyone has the opportunity to listen at their convenience. So if you have any questions, this is kind of the staff table over here. Frank, if you can raise your hand, he's going to be helping to just keep track of everybody who's here and making sure we kind of keep everybody flowing through. So if you want to check in with Frank before your session, just so he knows you're here and knows that you'll be heading up. So with all that being said, I think we're ready to start on time now. And I'd like to introduce first up Gary Drapek from the United Way of Lackawanna and Wayne counties. Thanks, Gary.
Good morning, and again, thank you for asking us to be here today. Those of us in nonprofit, I guess we know the old saying that man plans and God laughs. So instead of my opening presentation, I have to tell you what happened this morning. I was out front having a chat with Dana before everyone came in, and my cell phone went off. And this seems to be the norm of what we've been going through the past couple of months. And the call was from an individual from a local hospital who was calling me to tell me about a 76-year-old gentleman who was in the emergency room with his wife, who was being released today, who was there for chemo treatment. And the meds that the wife was taking are being paid for by their credit card, and he just realized that they have no oil in their tank. They live up in Moscow. Is there anything that we can do? I was able to authorize a minimum delivery to their house up in Moscow, and hopefully we're going to work with them on the meds. The reason I tell you that story is because this is what we've been seeing in emergency services over the past few months. And from a United Way perspective, and again, in deference to the city, United Way is really taking care of Lackawanna, Wayne, and now Pike counties, so it's a little bit more broad than just the city. We're seeing a big influx in individuals knocking on our door for emergency services. The emergency services run the gamut from fuel, coal, oil delivery, coal delivery. We have some propane deliveries that are being requested for, and also food insecurity. Over the weekend, I received a phone call on Friday night at home from another group of individuals who actually have my cell phone number, that there was a woman who with her three grandchildren was being evicted on Sunday from their home. Was there anything that we could do to help? I think these stories culminate the fear that we see from a United Way perspective. About a dozen years ago, a group of very concerned volunteers from United Way started something called the Gift of Warmth program. It was actually very foresight of them. They started the program with the idea of supplementing, and I want to underline that word, supplementing the state LIHEAP program, which many of you know is the Low Income Heating Energy Assistance Program. Over the course of years, that supplement has become a regular grant, I guess you can say, or an expected grant. Our fear this year, back in, I think it was October, our United Way held a similar forum that you see here with a lot of the social service agencies in town. Many of you are here today who were at that meeting to talk about the fact that we were hearing wind from the Department of Assistance that the LIHEAP program was going to be reduced as of January from a $500 minimum grant to a $300 minimum grant. That the SNAP program was going to be reduced from a family of two that would receive a grant of $500 to a grant of $173 as of January. This all had to do with the declaration of emergency from the federal government. Now, I don't want to say the good news, but part of the news that we're starting to hear now is that there is talk that that may be extended to June. If that could happen, then that's going to be a big plus for all of us in this field. That notwithstanding, this morning on my way in, I did a little Google check. The cost of oil, for example, today here in northeastern Pennsylvania is $5, a little bit more than $5 a gallon. Last year, it was somewhere around $2.98, $3 at this time. If you do the simple math and you're getting a $500 allocation from LIHEAP and you're paying $300 a gallon for oil with a minimum delivery of 125 gallons, you're not going to get that minimum delivery. Now, knock that down to $300, and then you're really going to be in deep trouble. So I think what we're looking, the reason I'm emphasizing this is that as a community, we are fortunate because, you know, we just don't collaborate. It seems like we're always having collaboration meetings and you know, let's convene meetings and stuff like that. But as a community, we are fortunate because we actually act on this. And what we're hoping as we move forward, this is the first time in my 38 years that I'm actually praying for a nice mild winter because that will help as well. So I just want to thank you, Laura, for putting this together, and Kathy and Maggie and Dana. And hopefully we can move forward with this as we move into the coming winter months. I'm getting my high sign over here, so does anybody have any questions?
I'll kick it off, but again, I welcome questions. We welcome questions from everyone. It's set up for Scranton Area Foundation in the city, but this is completely a collaborative discussion. But I'll kick off, you know, Gary, you know, when you're having these conversations, you've already been immersed in this work. Is there anything that you can guide other funders, stakeholders to say, okay, when 2023 hits, you know, what should we really be guiding our boards, our collaborators to do?
I think that's a great question, Laura. And we, I mean, from a personal standpoint, Nikki Keller, who was our PR person, used to hate when I would say this, but I'm going to say it. We are really, really good at putting Band-Aids on gaping wounds. You know, we're really good at first aid. What we're not so good at is actually solving the problem. We're very, very good at bringing people together to talk about the problem. But when we walk out of that room, everybody kind of goes their separate ways. I think one of the best documents that I've seen in a very long time that's come out is the wage index piece that came out of the University of Scranton. When you boil everything down to its bare minimum, the problem is right there. The average wage of the middle class family is not keeping up with the expenses. And I'm talking middle class family. This is mom, dad with maybe 2 jobs that they're working. We're not talking about those in poverty level. So I think as a community, if we can work, first of all, try to solve the problem. Right now, we have to, from our perspective, the gift of warmth goal is what we said from the very beginning is that no one in Lackawanna, Wayne County, and Pike County is going to freeze to death in the winter. So we are in emergency mode right now. Once we get into another warmer weather, I think what we should do as a community is take a look at how we can rally together. Maybe, and this is an awful thing to say, and the Chamber of Commerce is going to hate me for saying this, maybe we should start rallying to raise the minimum wage, like in Pennsylvania. Maybe that's something, maybe we should become more politically active, which is something that nonprofits never really did. So, thanks. Anything else? Well, thank you very much. And after that gloom and doom, happy holidays.
Thanks, Gary. Appreciate you being here. I know you had to run down to Harrisburg, so appreciate him coming in today. So next up, we have Gillette Lyons from Catholic Social Services. Gillette, you with us? Perfect. Excellent. Come on up. And as I said, there is a microphone here. If you have any questions throughout, please let us know. And as Gary mentioned too, yeah, it does sound, we're going to hear a little gloom and doom today. But I think the positive thing is that we're all here to think about how we can make it better. So we'll have to keep that in our minds, right? But at any rate, I appreciate Gillette. Come on up. And as we mentioned, Dana will be keeping time over here, so you just keep an eye on her. She'll let you know when you're getting close to time. So.
Good morning. My name is Jolette Lyons. I am the program director for Catholic Social Services Lackawanna County offices. I will be very honest, I'm only in this role about 2 months, so I am learning a whole lot. So in my limited time in this role, 3 main barriers that we have found are funding, availability and accessibility of housing, and affordability of housing. So to go over number 1, funding. There are limitations placed on funding. Obviously, there's not a giant ongoing pot of money that we can draw from. We're fortunate that we are positioned to have some money left. I think we're one of the few agencies that provide rental assistance that does have money at this point. However, I can honestly tell you, last week we had 26 calls for rental assistance on Monday. We had 28 calls for rental assistance on Tuesday, and we had 27 calls for rental assistance on Wednesday. We're going to run out of funding before we see half of those people. Not counting those people, we've got about 67 people who are on our waiting list to be helped. So as of December 1st, we said, we're probably not gonna get to you. So here are kind of what we can do for you in this time gap until we get some more money. Our process to obtain rental assistance from our agency can be lengthy. It can be time consuming. Start to finish, it can take about 3 weeks. We require an eviction notice. So by the time you get an eviction notice, you're already on borrowed time. So that prohibits us. We do our best to collaborate with the county assistance office, but again, as someone was saying, collaboration can be a lengthy process in itself. Trying to see who can help us with funding. If you can pay $400, we can pay $400, then we can help another family. But trying to track down caseworkers, trying to get answers, again, we're playing beat the clock, and sometimes that can really, prohibit getting things done in a time-sensitive manner. We require, again, our agency, there's minimum documents you need. You need a rental agreement from your landlord. You need an agreement that he is going to continue to work with us. He or she has to agree that they're not going to put you out on the street after we've paid the rent. So there's some things that we have to work with the other people outside of the funding sources. And the amount of funds that we have dispersed to our agency versus the ongoing need of the community is limited. Again, we have some money left, but we're going to run out of that pretty quickly. Point number 2, availability and accessibility of housing. Anybody who's kind of on the radar here would know there are not a lot of places available. They're not. And a lot of times, landlords that live outside of our community are raising the rent or have raised the rent, and then we have to work within a fair market value. Sometimes those fair market values aren't fair to low-income housing or low-income families, and so they're forced to pick maybe not suitable places just to stay off the street. One of the things we have had happen several times in my time since I've been here in the last 2 months, there is no family shelter in Lackawanna County, and that seems to be an ongoing need that we have faced. So we can maybe help you with rent, but you're trying to find a place. Where are we gonna put you? How are we gonna house you between when we can get you rent and when you can actually move in that in-between time? So what are we gonna do? Also, the specialization of those shelters. So for example, dads with daughters or moms with sons, because there's nowhere for them to go. And even we had a number of people that called and said, I have a dog and I don't wanna leave my dog and I don't know where to go. And we're like, you can pick. And that's unfortunate, but that's kind of the situation you're faced with. And if that is your only support, what do you do? So those are the kind of the things that we're we're seeing here. So the ultimate question is, what do we do with people who need emergency housing until they can find an appropriate place to live? That's it for me. Any questions?
Hi, Eileen Cipriani from the city of Scranton. So question, you're talking about transitional housing
Yes.
as being an issue. How long do you think is an appropriate amount of time or would be a helpful amount of time for people to have to stay in transitional housing?
That's hard because I don't have a whole lot of knowledge of that right now. I know generally shelters are about 30 days. I think that's probably a good place to start.
So do you know how much transitional housing we have compared to how much we need?
My understanding is we have Catholic Social Services runs St. Anthony's Haven. There's 26 beds, 20 for men, 6 for women.
And 0 for families?
0 for families. I believe there's also a women's shelter, but I can't speak to that because I'm not 100% on that. But there is a need. That's one of the things that we see ongoingly is and we've said, we can put your husband somewhere, we can put you somewhere, where are your kids going? Or we can take, they can stay with somebody, a family member, but now you're still separated. So that's just something we've been trying to figure out a good answer for that, and we don't have one, unfortunately. Anybody else?
So shelters for family and shelters for folks with companion animals.
Correct.
Those are two of the big
Yeah,
shelter
and that
challenges.
specialization piece, when you have a dad who's raising 2 daughters, because you can't put them together, that's
Gender.
kind of, right. And then the same thing with moms who might have sons.
Thank you.
Anybody else? Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. We appreciate you being here, and I know it's not easy speaking about this, so being only in the role for 2 months, and so we appreciate your insight and your helpfulness and your candor as well. We will be also hearing from additional other organizations that address housing, so hopefully we'll get a full picture from everybody. Next up, I'd like to introduce Lori Chaffers from Outreach, and I'm sorry, is it Chaffers or Chaffers? Chaffers, I messed it up. I'm so sorry. Lori Chaffers from Outreach. Come on up. Thank you so much for being with us.
Good morning. This doesn't count on my time. My kid learned in 2nd grade that there's a floss rule. If it's a double S, double F, or double L, it shortens the A. The science of reading, which I won't even get into today, but we should note it. Can my time start now? 5 minutes is much harder to do than 30, so I'm going to go really fast. And I didn't have a ton of time to prepare, but I did read the Scranton plan. And probably my biggest takeaway is you already have the answers. We need to just act on them. That's my beginning and ending, but I'll go with everything in between. Perhaps the greatest challenge is in meeting our mission at Outreach, which is to help people achieve economic self-sufficiency and family stability. Our greatest mission challenge for us internally is, quite frankly, that foundation support is wonderful and we need it for programs, but does not cover the administrative cost of doing business well. And so for accounting and fundraising and data management and all of those things, there's not enough money that is given to organizations to do that well, while also being required to be incredibly fiscally responsible, which we want to do, and provide the data that we are being required to do without any financial support to do that. However, the barriers that our participants encounter in this community, I'm sure you've already heard, we've already heard, and will continue to hear, are things like affordable housing, sensible transportation, affordable and quality childcare. And regarding our workforce and education, we're experiencing an increased demand for grade level pre-GED and GED tutoring. As a result of the pandemic, a number of students who struggled with the online learning are now coming to us as 18, 19, and 20-year-olds, having withdrawn from school and now needing their GED. Most recently, with skyrocketing prices on everything from food to gas, clients are having difficulty meeting their basic needs for food. And I'm sure as we enter the winter, we'll see more need for heat, electricity, and other kinds of basic needs. What are the primary needs of our organization's clientele? Our organization focuses on economic self-sufficiency and family stability. We assess each individual and try to identify the barriers and challenges specific to that person's situation, and then we work with them to identify solutions. If we cannot provide the solution ourselves, then we partner with many of our organizations who are here in the room, who I'm sure will share some of the same frustrations and challenges that we do. But we serve residents at Lackawanna County Prison, individuals who are on or underemployed, individuals lacking their high school diplomas, individuals with child welfare involvement, and quite frankly, we even serve individuals who are just trying to improve their quality of life through our parenting programs. I would argue that the primary need of the vast majority of these is what Gary had already said. 89% of the individuals we served in the last fiscal year earned less than $15,500. I can't imagine what it's like to live on that. I have 2 kids and a husband. I am well compensated for the work I have the privilege of getting to do at Outreach. And it's still a struggle to do all the things that we want to do, right? I can't imagine what that's like, but 89% of our individuals, so almost 90% of the folks we serve, are living well below the poverty level. It talks about one of the questions that we had to answer is which of the above barriers, challenges, or needs are the highest priority and should be addressed first. And my argument is that question is the chicken and the egg, right? I would argue, though, however, that it's incredibly difficult to find employment, work, obtain a GED, further your education, or raise a family without stable, affordable housing. I think of Maslow's hierarchy of needs. If you're not sure where you're going to sleep that night and you don't have food in your tummy, it's very hard to concentrate on arithmetic and basic reading skills or how to apply for a job and stay clean. We find that one of our greatest needs that we provide to people are very specific laundry packets that homeless people can carry that don't burst in their bags so that they can wash their clothes so that they can go for an interview. There are places where you can do your laundry for free, and there's places where you can get soap for free, but it's not the kind of soap you can carry with you in a backpack when you're sleeping under a bridge. That's one of the challenges that we're experiencing. When we put out a call for that, we have to be very specific. It has to be OxyClean, it has to be this kind, right? Anyway, but I would argue that housing and giving people for housing first is a primary need. Do I have suggestions or ideas? Does our organization have ideas on how to make progress on these efforts? Sure we do. We talked about them last week at the Living Wage Report. We talked about them at the last convening in October with Gary. We talked about them 5 years ago. When I started at the county a long time ago, I can remember having a position that was involving surveying and do data and data entry. And here's the resounding call that we heard from the community. Stop surveying us. Do something. Do something. We don't need to talk about the problems. We need to act on the solutions. And those solutions, I read the plan. It's sitting at my desk. I read it over the weekend. I read the Living Wage Report with its recommendations. I've read the ALICE reports that have been provided by United Way. We have the solutions. We need to have convenings about how to take action and actually have a working session about what comes next, not just what's the problem. We really need to be working together on the solutions. We need to cut red tape. We need to cut the red tape that takes 3 weeks to get someone who's in emergency housing. And I would argue, I see Eileen here, I don't know if you're speaking, I would argue that the county and the city need to work together to solve these issues, regardless of political affiliations, because the fact of the matter is the county paid for almost half a hotel full for 2 full years during the pandemic. I'll leave that there. I'm not at the county anymore. Eileen, good luck to you. Yeah. So, gosh, I have so many other things. I'm at 2 minutes. I might take 3. One of the things I want to say to you today is we talk about meds and eds, and the other group of population that we don't talk a lot about are the social service sector. I am sure between educators and social services, we take up another primary section of people who are producing in this community, and we don't pay people enough. Most of my staff are probably qualify for services, and as much as we try to resolve that through grants and putting raises and those kinds of things into our planning, the fact of the matter is most of my people are making between $37,000 and $40,000 a year, which for a family of 4, as you know, does not meet our living wage in any way, shape, or form. Never mind it's not even the median wage. So I would argue that we need to focus on allowing them to be meaningful contributors to our community and our business sector. Finally, the last thing that I had actually prepared until I got the list of questions yesterday and I changed my presentation, is that I just want to pick up on this theme of community pride that is outlined in the plan. I think community pride is really important, and I think the ideas about building neighborhoods matters, but I think one of the things that we have to do better is help people understand what it means to be a good neighbor. I'm going to give you a few examples. In my own neighborhood, when I was growing up, my mom was a single parent, and she was a hospice nurse, so she would get called out at 3 a.m, and I had a really amazing neighbor who would let us call them at 3 a.m, and I'd schlep over there at and sleep on their couch until she got me up and got me ready for school the next day, unless my mom was home in time. That's what it meant to be a good neighbor. I had people who drove me to Sunday school and to church to make sure that I got what I needed. Right now, I live in a mixed income neighborhood. It's renter and owner occupied, with a number of different socioeconomic statuses represented, with a number of Section 8 housing vouchers around me. My husband and I are fortunate enough to be blessed, and we have what we need. We have transportation, we have 2 cars, we have a good job, I have health care, all of those things. And so we have made it a commitment to stay in our neighborhood. My good friend, my neighbor, was taking a CNA course and her transportation died in the middle of it. It happened to be up in Clark Summit. To go to that course was no longer possible for her. So I drove her every single day for the next 3 weeks because I knew that getting a CNA certificate was the difference between a very small salary and something that could be $2, $3, $4 an hour more. Her little boy missed school recently due to no fault of her own, but he missed 2 days in a row, and I yelled at him. I sat him down and I said, Sion, I love you, I care for you, you're important to me, you have to go to school. And if you miss the bus because your dad didn't get you there, you knock on our door and AJ will take you every single day because it's important. My other neighbor has a job now that she has to go to school she has to go to work before school and gets home after school. And so we've been working together to make sure that all of these little kiddos have some place to be, right? I know, I have to end. But I want to say that community pride is not just about feeling good about where you live, but it's about sharing responsibility for each other in our community. I am hoping that at Outreach, we're doing that in the support systems we're building among the parents who come to our group, our different kinds of group activities. But I don't know how you go from community pride and just feeling good about where you live to caring for neighbor, right? I know I have to be done now. I think that's an important thing to put into the plan. I think the plan is good, and that what you need to do next is just act on it. Sorry. Good. Questions?
Fantastic presentation, and I think that one of the things we'll commit to doing is having a part 2, right? Acting on it. Absolutely. We're hearing that's a need. You know, we'd be happy to co-convene with others to, if that's a theme that's coming out, we'll commit to that.
Laurie, I have a question for you, actually. I'd like to hear more about what you had planned to say to planning, and we're pretty good on time.
It was just really about this idea of how to build neighborhoods, right? I think, so I worked in Camden, New Jersey for a period of time. I apologize for my nose and for the next person who has to come speak. I worked in Camden, New Jersey, and they had organizations, a lot of organizations like NeighborWorks and some of what UNC does, community organizing. I'm a social worker by trade. Community organizing is in my blood. I'm not a clinical social worker. I am a systems person. And what they did was empowered the community to take responsibility for each other, for the neighborhood, for holding our city officials accountable. We did something called an Ugliest House contest. It gained nationwide news. And it was to hold the city accountable for having money in a pot that they weren't using to tear down abandoned homes. And so I think that we need to empower our community to take responsibility for caring for each other, caring for our neighborhood. One of the things, I could go through the list of different things, but one of the things my husband did in the time that we've been here is our neighbor's landlord was selling their house, and our neighbor said, we're gonna have to move. And AJ said, why? And he said, because we can't afford to buy the house. And AJ said, sure you can. It was like $105,000, right? And so he sat down with our neighbor and explained to him how to do the finances and do a home buyer's loan so that he can do a first-time home buyer. And so our neighbor now has equity that he would have never had before because he just didn't understand how to go buy. We were going to buy the house if he didn't buy the house, but we wanted him to get to buy the house because we wanted him to build his equity and his value and his net worth. I think that we have to have a commitment to that. Individual, right? That's my individual commitment. We have talked about leaving our neighborhood because it's not always easy. But we've made that commitment, and I'm not blowing our horn. I'm saying we need more people to do that. I will say about the city, the only reason we didn't move into the city and make that is because, quite frankly, we were considering the taxes, right? But otherwise, we would have made that commitment to be here, right? And I've thought about buying houses here just so we can offer affordable housing. Like we don't have that much money yet, but someday maybe, right? Like maybe I get to be an investor, but so I work for a nonprofit, so I don't know. That was all, Maggie, is that I really think one of the missing pieces, there are systemic answers. I believe in that. I'm a social worker who believes that the system has to do some changing. I also believe, though, simultaneously, we really need those grassroots organizations to build capacity in individuals, to build shared, it used to be when I got in trouble from my neighbor down the street, my mom knew by the time I got home, and I got in trouble at home too. Now, you yell at the kid down the street, and you get a phone call from the parent that you yelled at their kid. Now, what we have done in my little neighborhood is decided we're all going to parent together, right? Like, we've made a real collective action. I am fortunate that I have parents who came alongside with us, right? To say, no, the rule at my house, and now I think on my block, is be kind, be kind, be kind. And so, like, we're working on that. But that takes intentional, community-based leaders to do that. And I think that's one of the things we have to foster up. I saw the community ambassadors in the plan, but I think it has to be more about, not just about our pride in the community, but our pride in who I am and how I'm gonna interact with Lisa, Laurie, Liz, like how we're gonna do this together, not as an organization. We need that too. I don't wanna disregard that. We need all of that. But we also need it at this very individual level. We need our churches and our mosques and our synagogues to be involved in that process. We need to have neighbor again. Who is my neighbor? You are my neighbor, right? And how do I care for you? So that's all I was gonna add.
Can I ask one question? So one of the things that we're trying to do right now is, we want to be as equitable as we can with all the funding that we have, and trying to figure out where we're missing our mark. But one of the things we're trying to do right now that we could use the help of all of you for is we're trying to identify where the funding is going, because then we can identify where it's not going. And we realize that there's probably neighborhoods with the language barriers, other barriers that we don't get into. And our part in there about the ambassadors, and you make a really good point about that, is once we identify those neighborhoods that we're not affecting, that maybe we can come up with an ambassador that can help us get into that neighborhood and help us share information about all the programs we have, the county has, the state has, whomever. But, to call on everybody here, for a point of action, how can we collect all that information, put it together, and figure out where we're missing the mark?
Yeah, well, so as much as I said we all hate surveys, I think a survey like that would allow you to know who's doing what where, right? And I think there's probably some people who have that information all in the room. A survey to understand that component. I will argue that someone like we know, there's some places we know that like the Skyview, Valley View, Hilltop area is a desert, right? I would argue that Gus Fahey and your Parks Department this summer did a great job. We serve up at Skyview in the summer, but only one day a week for one morning a week. Those kids, it was like a dearth up there. I mean, we would show up with food. My experience there this summer is I brought a bag of food from CHOP with me to our arts program this summer, and when we were leaving, they took out blankets and dumped out their bags of food, and they were just so, like, the kid was like, that happened to have candy in it. I know, not the best food. But they were like, you gave us candy? They were so excited. But I think we kind of know. I think if you ask us to fill out the survey, I don't know, Lisa, what do you think? I think we know where the need really is. I think you called it out in the plan. The city knows where it is. I think if you don't know what neighborhoods it's getting into, I think there are natural community leaders. I think of Chandra. I think of I can't name them all. I think Julie has a good handle on that. I think they know who some of those community leaders are and can get us to those answers. We're searching for some of that too. For example, in our workforce, one of the areas we think there's a struggle in workforce is really building on the skills that our immigrants and refugees bring with them, and allowing them to work within their skill and capacity, as opposed to placing them in jobs at TJ Maxx or other places like that. I think that might be the one place where a survey could be helpful to you, saying what areas are you serving, where are the areas that you're not serving that you think there's a need, how is your money being spent? But I think we're all getting money from, we could go through the list. Oh, you're going to this event. Oh, you're going to that foundation. Oh, did you put in this application? Like, we're all doing that. We're running the same circuit. We can tell you the circuit.
You had a follow-up question though, right, Eileen?
No, I think you got it.
You got it?
Yeah.
Okay.
Lori, that was excellent. I appreciate your candor and your forthrightness. I think that's exactly what's needed. I think you're saying a lot what's on many of our minds was where we have to have where the rubber meets the road now. So I think I completely agree with you and appreciate your candor on that. And I think this gives us a lot to think about where we can start affecting real change. So thank you. Next up, we have Lisa Durkin from United Neighborhood Centers of Northeastern Pennsylvania, who was referenced already a couple times. So Lisa, thanks for being with us today. I'm just going to do a quick reminder as you're walking up. If you can check in with Frank if you're speaking today, just so he knows you're here and that we have everybody on site. Again, questions can be up here, and then Dana will be keeping time. I apologize if this is repetitive for people who have been in the room, but there are people coming and going, so I want to make sure everybody is aware about what's going on. So thanks so much.
Good morning. I think that it's early to start the broken record, but I'm afraid that's where I'm at. Just having only heard two people speak before me, and they really hit the notes. So I might be able to do this in 2 minutes. I'm Lisa Durkin. I'm the president of United Neighborhood Centers, and we serve families and individuals at almost every age level through our child care centers, our healthy aging campuses, our community services programs, our teen programs, community education, community revitalization. So we've got a pretty large reach in the community. And because of that, I'm often asked, what's the most pressing need right now? What are you seeing the most of? You know, what's the urgency? What if we can only fix one thing? And it's a challenging question because so many things impact another. Good jobs. People need good jobs with family sustaining wages, and transportation is needed with that. And then there's childcare, and you need transportation for childcare, and you need jobs for childcare. And having all of these things then could disqualify somebody for subsidies with utilities and food. So it's easier to put it in a circle than it is, on a tier of what's most important. What do we do first? Because they impact each other in significant ways. That being said, hard pressed, I say housing. I say affordable housing. As Lori said, what can really happen if somebody doesn't have a roof over their head? There is no measure of health or success that a person can attain if they don't have safe, quality, affordable housing. I would add to that housing with dignity, housing of choice. Meaning that a person in this community has some ability to decide where they're going to live, not just what they can get and what they can scrape by with, but to live in the neighborhood where their mother-in-law lives, where their children's little cousins go to the same school, where they have a support system and have a real chance at succeeding and happiness to go along with not just getting by but thriving. I think, I know that housing was a challenge in 2019 and all the years prior. I think what we saw during the pandemic was many affordable rental units coming off the market. We saw rents that were doubling and tripling for people that could barely afford them as they were. We saw preventative maintenance kind of go to the wayside, the same way that we weren't prioritizing preventative health. We weren't going for mammograms and checkups because the number one priority was just protecting ourselves from COVID. And that happened in the housing market too, which then not putting those things on the back burner led to some more blight, some more really tough positions for these units to be habitable. I don't think that the problem has ended, nor has it leveled out. It remains a big challenge for us. I think, solutions, they're difficult. They're a big reach. I think that we need to create more affordable rental units, and we need to prioritize the work of local nonprofit developers. And that's uncomfortable for me to say in this forum, because I represent the only local nonprofit housing development corporation in this area. So I am aware of how self-serving that comes across, but I stand by the statement. We need more units available. We have to build them. We have to create them. We need to prevent evictions. that are results of inability to pay. We've seen that the families and individuals we're serving being evicted and having a near impossible time finding another place to live. And what happens during that time of homelessness, I think, and I have no data on this whatsoever, but takes years to recover from. The belongings, the life that's left behind, what the families are able to pack up. Lori kind of alluded to this, what you can fit in your bags, what you can fit in your car, which of your favorite toys for the children get to come with you and which are never to be seen again. So, we think of the structure and the health and safety of the roof, but, all of the emotional trauma that goes with that is just another piece that we're needing to chip away at. I think we need to preserve our housing stock through home repair and home improvements, trying to bring those units back on the market and make them available for our families and individuals in the community that are desperate for these options. And I've left plenty of time for questions.
So I guess it's a positive, but a small positive. As part of our ARPA dollars, we're going to release a little over $1 million in home rehab dollars. And unlike the HUD home rehab dollars that come with, as it's been alluded to before, tons of red tape, we'll be able to reduce that to a certain amount because the rules from the Treasury are a little bit less stringent than the rules from HUD. But that said, it's a minor drop in the bucket compared to what we need. I think we need a long-term strategy on how do we continue to bring funds in at a higher level in order to help this situation, because we have so many houses. Our housing stock, as you've seen in the plan, is extremely low or extremely old. That comes with a lot of problems. We want to put out dollars for lead remediation, but we haven't really found someone who's able to do that for us. We're going to probably go through an RFP process to be able to find someone to be able to do that for lead pipes. But working with all of you is really something we need to do to be able to identify these housings and figure out how to administer, because we do not have the ability to administer programs like this at such a massive scale that we really need to do in the city.
Well, that is good news, Eileen. And I think I speak for all of my colleagues in the room when I say that we appreciate that. We're grateful to be brought into the conversations, and we're grateful to the city and to the Scranton Area Foundation, for showing what leadership is at these times. We all need to be together, and we all need to come up with the solutions.
Lisa, one thing you didn't touch on is your workforce development that you do through the United Neighborhood Centers and getting people into the workforce.
Sure.
Have those needs increased? Has the number of people coming through those programs increased, or is that something that money should be targeted for?
Certainly money should target that. It's hard to say whether they've increased. I mean, since we've started the program, yes, we're seeing more of a demand, we're seeing more interest. I don't know that we're comparing apples to apples. This kind of work for us started last year, but I think, we can't compare anything from 2021 to anything that happened before that, because so many things are different, but particularly in the workforce. Not only do we have that same issue, where people need family sustaining wages, they need jobs that pay those, but people have also, I think, just sort of re-examined everything because of the pandemic. What do I want to be doing? What's not only putting food on the table, but allowing me to sit down and eat that food with my family in a way that, that I don't need to have two jobs or get up and go back to work at night, or, do something that gives me fulfillment and satisfaction, because I think we weren't only looking at our paychecks, but our health and happiness and I don't know, facing our own mortality, I think, had something to do with it, how we're going to spend the rest of our lives. And that's as true for us as it is for the marginalized consumers that we're serving. So yes, the need, Kathy, I don't know if I answered your question, for workforce is great. I think that the more options that we make available are going to lead to good results. I think that the formula changes. I don't think that there's a one-size-fits-all approach to workforce development. And I think what we've found for sure, just in the one-year pilot with the work that we did, for somebody who's maybe been caught up in systemic poverty, who's lived in families where maybe the adults weren't career minded, but moved from job to job and never really embraced the idea of a career ladder and moving up. In order for those individuals that we're serving, it's like everything has to be in place. The transportation, the food, the childcare, everything that we've talked about. It all has to be in place along with the safety net and along with the motivation, that there is a menu of options. There's choice in here and there's success, despite the setbacks you might face. And we know you faced them in the past, but there's a way forward.
Yes to all of that. I think you guys are doing great with the RISE program. I met with Liz yesterday. It was fantastic.
Thanks, Liz.
I just want to add to that in answer to your question, we've been doing workforce for like 35 years in different capacities. But one of the things I will tell you we've had happen, two things. One, we've had a huge demand. So like CanPack and Cintas and a couple of others have actually started holding their career fairs at our agency because they just have such great need and they can't get people to fill it. Simultaneously, CanPack is a more advanced manufacturing company. And so some of the individuals who applied to get there couldn't do the work there. So there's a skill gap. So, and I agree with you. I think people are reevaluating. People don't really necessarily want to do those jobs anymore, but they're paying really well right now. So I think it's kind of twofold. The demand has increased for workers, but the skills haven't kept up with. When I say we are our GED program, so we've been partnering with RISE to serve some of the individuals for the GED. They are so either there's a language barrier that is a major issue that we're trying to overcome in partnership, or two, they're so far below literacy that they can't possibly pass their GED. And so we're just, in our impact report, we just kind of talked about how we're doing grade level improvements just to get them up to the point where they can take the GED. So I do think there's a need there, and it's a ever shifting need and competing need for the demands that are being placed on the workforce system. Sorry, thank you.
Thank you.
Lisa, one last thing. Can you talk a little bit more about the idea of nonprofit housing development?
Sure. So, well, for United Neighborhood Centers, we created our Community Development Corporation in 2008 because of meetings like this and conversations like this and internal conversations where we were just sick to death of talking about not having enough housing in the community. So we decided to build our own. So for us, I mean, the most affordable way to build units has been through the Pennsylvania Low-Income Housing Tax Credit Program. It's a very competitive process. We're competing most often when we're not successful, it's because we're competing against the larger cities, the Philadelphias and the Pittsburgh. And in not this past round, but last year, those communities received the lion's share of the awards that were out there in communities. This community received none. Nearby, I don't remember the nearest, maybe Lehigh, little pieces of it. So I would argue that, we need to get there at the state level to at least be arguing for our share. This community needs to receive its share of resources. Those funds typically provide.
Is that an advocacy problem?
Yes, I think so. Or an advocacy solution, half full, half empty. The match money that comes with it. Part of having a successful application and receiving, $7.6 million at the state level for these tax credit programs is showing that the local community has skin in the game too. That not only is it needed, it's wanted. There's, a community in place that's in favor of these housing units. And in many cases, some matching dollars, much smaller, but enough to just make up the gap difference. I think that now, while I say it's been the most affordable way to build, I think there's other ways, and that's what we're exploring. Since that's a once a year crack at it to receive those dollars. You know, we're looking at other sources of funding and what can we do on smaller scale. That year's going to go by anyway. In the meantime, if we can put up, you know, a 2-unit here or a 1-unit of housing there, I think every little bit is going to get us there.
Thank you, Lisa.
Bill.
Gary had referred to transitioning from putting on Band-Aids to addressing structural issues, and you kind of presented UNC as the housing expert in the area. So could you speak a bit about the kind of structural changes that might be able to address long-term the housing crisis? It's a national issue. It's not unique to us, but absentee landlords, holding landlords accountable, financial. What would you see as some of the structural changes that might begin to address the housing crisis?
Blight remediation, renovation, building, new construction. As I said, I'll keep saying more units, more units. I think everybody hit on it a little bit. My colleague from Catholic Social Services talked about transitional housing, you know, as a way to get started, because what do we do with our homeless families when, you know, obviously the answer is they need an apartment, they need affordable rents, but what happens in the meantime? And so it's been our experience. About 24 years ago, this community got involved in the continuum of care through HUD, and HUD was, we were receiving probably then about $1.5 million for transitional housing programs. At some point, HUD in their infinite wisdom decided that transitional housing wasn't the solution, it wasn't working. And asked us to move into a rapid rehousing model. And they said, this is gonna work better for homeless families. So whereas transitional housing, the idea is, you know, just get somebody somewhere, let them be there until the long-term solution is made available. HUD said, well, what you're doing is you're keeping them in this state of homelessness for too long. Rapid rehousing means find that apartment as quick as possible, get the roof over the head, and then get the services delivered. All of those things that you know, we know are important, you make them happen, but once housing is found, and then gradually step away. You know, you might be paying 100% of a person's rent if they have no source of income moving in here, but step it down so that it's not the person that moves away then at the end of 30 days or 6 months or 18 months, but it's the agency that moves away. I think if we had more options like that, that's a good start. Lori said something, it's escaping me now though. You did indeed. Community, neighbors. You know, that's an important piece to end all of this. The being a good neighbor, you know, it sounds almost corny. That's almost choked on that coming out because it's not exactly what I mean. It's not saying enough. But belonging in the neighborhood and being valued by your neighbors, being part of that community, you know, that helps to build support systems and some of those safety nets where you have somebody looking out for you and you have somebody to share some of these burdens with. So I think all of that happening is the answer.
Hi, Lisa, I have a question for you and anybody else who already spoke who might want to answer this. But when you think about like the foundation staff or other funders that might be in this room or at home, what would you like for us to do when we get back to our office? What would you like to see from us helping to address some of these issues? What could we do?
Well, that's a great question, Maggie. Maybe prioritize solutions. I assume you're gonna, you know, take all of this information, play around with it, organize it. What's the low-hanging fruit? What can we, you know, hit right away to see some change? What are the longer term but well worth our effort? Maybe organize a few subgroups around that. You know, who's in which area to start impacting this change? Organization, I think that's what you all do best, convening these groups and, you know, bringing all of this to fruition.
Can I answer part of that too? Please, but use the mic just with the
Hi,
Hi, I'm Maria Montoro Edwards. I'm President and CEO of Maternal and Family Health Services. And I think one of the things that this organization, that the foundations can do is to continue to convene and to help us to advocate on a broader scale. There are some challenges that are unique to Pennsylvania that we are constantly dealing with at Maternal and Family Health Services. And I'm going to talk a little bit about it when I speak. But reimbursements are so low for maternity care. We really need to address that on the state level. Reimbursements for mental and behavioral health care. Pennsylvania makes it extraordinarily difficult to provide those services. There are such restrictions on who you can hire and who cannot be reimbursed. And also Pennsylvania WIC, we are the largest provider of WIC in Pennsylvania. And Pennsylvania is one of 9 states that's lagging behind the other 41. We do things a little bit slower. And so mom has to physically come into a WIC center to load her card, where in other states that's done automatically. So during COVID, mom had to get on the bus, come to one of the centers and get the card loaded. There are other ways to do that, and we could do it faster. Now, there is a group that's convened within the state, but they're still saying it won't be finished until 2026. Really? I mean, I cannot imagine a technology solution needs to take 4 years. And we know in Lackawanna County that there's at least 2,000 people who are eligible for WIC benefits but not using them. Why aren't they using them? Because it's difficult, perhaps, to get into the center to get their cards loaded. So we make it difficult in many ways. So the convening, helping us to advocate on a broader scale in Pennsylvania with our elected officials. And I have to say, our elected officials, when we meet with them one-on-one, they are spectacular and so willing to help. And I think it would help us as a community to come together with what our priorities might be on the state level.
Thank you for the time.
Thank you so much. Next up, we have Krista Summers from the Catherine McCauley Center. Thanks for being with us today, Krista. Thanks for all the questions that you got, Lisa. We appreciate it.
Hi, good morning, and thank you to the Scranton Area Foundation for convening this meeting and understanding the intersectionality, I think, of all of the points that we're going to make today. I'm here to speak about affordable housing, and many of the points that I hoped to make were already made by my colleagues, which I'm thrilled about too. But I do have some optimism too to share as well. So I'm the executive director of the Catherine McCauley Center. For those of you who may not know, we are a nonprofit who exists to serve those who are experiencing homelessness and living in poverty with an emphasis on women and children. We do this through a variety of housing programs, and we have a shelter for women with children in Lackawanna County. I think an example of collaboration, especially when we look at all of the needs in the housing industry, that's worked really well recently is we've had 47 conversations throughout the past months on emergency rental assistance has ended. The public benefits that have been increased throughout the period of COVID are coming to an end at the end of December. So what does that mean? All of our agencies in this room have been receiving significant more amount of calls looking for emergency rental assistance, looking for those supportive services. Ours have quadrupled over the last 2 months when we go back and look at the numbers. So a few weeks ago, I was able to convene working with United Neighborhood Centers, Catholic Social Centers, and Valley Youth House to say, what are we going to do about this? Let's try to get something in place. It's an emergency plan. It's not a long-term plan, but it's to address the immediate needs too. After only a few meetings and relatively low lift compared to what we all do every day too, we were able to secure $250,000 thanks to the Moses Taylor Foundation for an emergency eviction prevention fund. That hopefully will launch in the next few weeks to keep people in their homes throughout the winter. So to keep families housed and not on the streets throughout the winter months. By collaborating with these agencies, we're able to do this work because we're piecemealing the process throughout our agencies. We're keeping it low barrier. When you come to one of 4 places, we can say, here's the application, here's your award. We can go through that itself and work together. I think there is an onus on all of the nonprofits and the local government in the room to say, what can we do about this too? How can I move something forward? And then, of course, the piece is always funding, but how can we move the solutions that we have in mind forward? Because we already have identified the needs. I think there's an onus on everyone in this room, too, to understand what all of our agencies provide, what resources are already available, too. I know it's extremely frustrating to me to hear somebody say that there are no available emergency housing shelters for women with sons. That's not the case, right? And I think it's part of our agency's issue to properly say that. What are we doing? What resources do we have available? But we need to understand what is available too, so we're not saying, oh, it doesn't exist, or how can we work on this too? I think we can use the forums that already exist and use them well and strategically to say, here's what we're doing, here's what's happening, have those warm conversations, say, call Lisa and call Lori and say, here's my problem, how can you solve it, but following it through as well. So those are an immediate kind of success. Long-term solutions too, I'm really excited to say that Catherine McCauley Center, we've listened, we heard that there is no intact family or father-led shelters in the area. We're opening one in the spring of 2023. Now it's a little premature because we don't have a date, but saying how can we do that? We have a property secured, we need to rehab it and get it ready to do those things. But I think it's looking at that too. We're opening some transitional housing for single low-income women. Again, those things aren't immediate needs. They'll take some time to get ready to, but we're hoping to launch it in the spring or summer. It's not to toot my own horn up here, but we're a small nonprofit, right? And these are the things that we've been able to do relatively easily. Now, none of them have launched yet, so I hope I could still say that in 6 months. But I think it's saying, what can I do to be a piece of the greater solution too? How can we work together? How can we find something that really can address the issues and make that ask too? Maybe we won't get funding for the next thing that we go to ask for. Maybe it won't help, but at least it's out there and at least we can piecemeal it too, because the needs are significant. We know that we're not going to be able to do it alone. We know that we're going to need to work together and we're going to need to share those different resources too. I think also, and I briefly mentioned it, using the forums that exist. So when all the housing providers meet once a month at the COC or at the Housing Coalition too, using that time and using that opportunity to really have those conversations and take the action items there, and then go back to the funders and saying, here's our ideas and here's what we can do and here's how we envision things moving forward too. I also think that advocacy is a huge part of everything that we're doing too. So at the federal level, at the local level as well too, when we look at the affordability of units too, everyone has mentioned our funding is somewhat restricted, especially when we're talking about HUD dollars. Our fair market rents for 2023 for a 2-bedroom is $1,008. Better than it was last year, still not on par with what a 2-bedroom truly costs, that's utilities included, in the Scranton area this year too. So it's advocacy on saying, how can we change that formula to make it reflective of what the market truly looks like today, rather than using the 5-year look back? How can we change some of those things too? And now some of them are bigger than us, but there's some things that we can do on a local level as well too. And what can our piece be? So we're open, we're excited. Again, we're a small nonprofit, but anything that we can be a piece of, we know that we can't take ownership all on our own too, but if we can make it easier to work together to do something, we're happy to do that. And I'm happy to have that conversation here today. That's all.
You mentioned that there are available shelters for gender differences in terms of a mom with sons, et cetera. Is it just that there's not a sufficient amount, or?
I think it's probably an outdated, so it used to be that our shelter only took boys under the age of 13. That's no longer the case. Yeah, it's a rule shift.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Hi. So, Krista, been on the Housing Coalition, had these conversations, been part of maybe one or two of those 26 conversations. And one of the things which I'm so excited about is the ability of collaboration to push this stuff forward. What can funders and the city do to continue that push for those individuals who are still in the background, not jumping on board that need for collaboration in order to actually solve the systemic problems?
It's a good question too. I think incentivize people to come in and get some of these dollars too. And I think it's really on the nonprofits. Lori had mentioned the administrative burden that nonprofits face too. So making space that there is an administrative cost too. I know for the rental assistance program that we plan to launch over the next few weeks, there are no administrative dollars included that. So each of our agencies is going to piece together what that administrative part looks like. We're taking some ownership on that. Now we knew that going in too. That wasn't part of the ask because it was a big ask, it was a quick ask, and it was kind of an emergent ask too. But I think that administrative piece of things and giving nonprofits an incentive to do so and a way to do so that we can fund it would be a big piece of that.
Addendum. Because Krista mentioned transitional housing, and I was talking about HUD's research that transitional housing doesn't work. Part of that research, though, was however, it works for specific populations, victims of domestic violence, women and children. In certain areas, we believe that is the better solution. We're just not necessarily prioritizing funding for it. So I just wanted to add that because you're talking about those programs, and yes, there is research that works, and there is value. It's getting harder and harder, I expect, to find the dollars to support those programs, and I think that's an area where we should be looking at.
Yeah, I agree. And I think I agree too. And rapid rehousing is the statistically proven more effective method, except for single women too. And I think a big theme across all of the programs that we're talking, both immediate need and long-term need, is what does the supportive services look like? So what are the agencies doing, that case management piece of things? It's really what's going to be the difference of success or not success. Dollars are a big part of the solution. Getting people into housing is a big part of the solution and really our first part of this puzzle. But what are the supportive services to maintain that permanent housing, to teach those life skills, to be that support system? And I think there's a way that all of the nonprofit agencies can be that support system while we work on a really great community and how to be a good neighbor, and we make that hopefully gradual transition in what I think we're describing as a perfect world.
In my previous life, I worked at the county. And I will tell you, and I spent some time with the housing folks, and I will tell you that collaboration among the housing agencies was really hard to achieve. So I just wanted to take a minute to congratulate you and all the other leaders who came together to get a $250,000 emergency grant to do this, because it's unprecedented in our community, and that is awesome. Also, I'll just take this also second to say, go women, right? There's been a lot of change here. Go women.
I think it's important to see ourselves too as partners and not competitors, because we are competitors. We're all competing for the same pots of money, right? So how can we work together to get that money in a way that's strategic and efficient too? So we're not duplicating, going back to talking about what resources are available, we're not duplicating the same services. We're not going after the same pot of money for the same things. Maybe we can, one organization expands a program and then we create a new one that can work together or do something completely different too. It's a good point. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And I misspoke earlier. That was Krista Murray from Catherine McCauley Center. My apologies for misspeaking. I'm really messing up the names today, so my apologies for that. This calls to mind, we have an extra minute, so I'll just mention that Kathy Fitzpatrick, myself, Ryan Jennings, who's here from the Wayne County Community Foundation, and Brittany Pagnotti, who's our communications manager at the Scranton Area Community Foundation, had attended the Pennsylvania Community Foundation Association conference early last week. And one of the things that we heard is a growing trend with community foundations to really focus deeply into collaboration and the need for bringing these groups together to really press on what the needs are. And one of the examples that they used was NASA, and how NASA was able to say, in 1960 they were going to send somebody to the moon, and 9 years later actually made it happen, even though it felt like an impossibility. And they did that not by creating things themselves, but by collaborating. And so I think that's how we maybe need to start viewing our community, is how do we collaborate to get ourselves to the moon. I just want to mention that the community foundations in our region are really focusing on this. I should say also Luzerne Foundation, who's not with us today, was also there as well. So we are thinking about this very strategically. I believe our next speaker is not quite here yet, so I'm going to jump our schedule and go next to Chris Norton from WVIA.
Thank you. I'm Chris Norton, the Senior Vice President of Community Engagement at WVIA, and on behalf of our President and CEO, Carla McCabe, and all of our staff, I feel very honored to be in this room with people who are on the front line fighting the good fight. And I've enjoyed very much listening to the presentation so far, and frankly, I'm here more to listen than to speak. WVIA is the public media, of course, for Northeastern Pennsylvania, public media service. And I say service because unlike commercial television and radio stations, WVIA is mission-driven, dedicated to public service, and we are a nonprofit. Today, I'd just like to point out a few of the many ways that WVIA's mission dovetails with the City of Scranton's Strategic Economic Development Plan. One important goal of the plan, of course, is to increase educational attainment. And education is in WVIA's DNA as well as in our official name. We're Northeastern Pennsylvania Educational Television Association. Many know us from Sesame Street and many other children's educational programs. From there to our local PBS Kids in the Classroom visits, where we deliver books and create excitement about reading through PBS Kids programming. From Scholastic Scrimmage television show, our Enhanced Scholar program, and our vast online curriculum and teacher resources. From preschool reading readiness to lifelong learning for adults, WVIA has as a top priority education. Another planned goal is to increase the quality of life in the region. And again, that's what PBS, NPR, and WVIA programming are all about. Nature, Nova, great performances, Masterpiece, Morning Edition, All Things Considered, Metropolitan Opera, classical music, jazz and homegrown music, Erica Funke's art scene, Keystone Edition arts and health programs. During COVID, we televised the Scranton Civic Ballet's The Nutcracker, thank you, Lackawanna County. This year, we convened and hosted a regional summit on food insecurity. I'm pleased to be sitting at a table with Phoebe Wilson and Emily Solomon of Breadbasket of Northeastern Pennsylvania. They were there. They were part of that summit on food insecurity. Next year, we're commissioning a new musical composition to celebrate the 50th anniversaries of the Northeastern Pennsylvania Philharmonic and WVIA Radio. Don't miss the world premiere concert next November. Education and the quality of life. But I also want to emphasize two of the very pillars of Scranton's Strategic Economic Development Plan: industrial growth and diverse talent, because they stress the need for a vigorous workforce development strategy, both in our schools and throughout our community. And just this year, WVIA used the latest data from the Institute to produce a series of Careers that Work videos targeting middle-aged and high school students, accompanying educational curriculum, all highlighting 14 specific high-demand jobs in our region. These resources are already available to Scranton schools and those throughout the region in English, and we are particularly delighted that a new grant from the Scranton Area Community Foundation will enable us to make them available in Spanish in the coming year. We'll be working with the STARS program at Marywood University and other community partners to publicize this resource at church meetings and youth social gatherings and sporting events and more. In fact, the STARS program in Marywood was just featured last night on WVIA's Keystone Edition television program, and there'll be several repeat broadcasts this week. We're looking forward to continuing and expanding our workforce development initiative. Last January, we helped publicize and recruit participants for the initial cohort of the new RISE program, a partnership between Johnson College and United Neighborhood Centers. We're now considering convening a regional workforce development summit at WVIA, so that the many organizations doing important work in this space can talk to each other, from educators to industry to social services, learn from each other, and so that WVIA can help them share their stories. Many other episodes of WVIA's Keystone Edition business program deal with the need for economic growth and what's being done about it. Next Monday, for example, December 12th, the topic is Making Over Main Street, how communities can reinvigorate downtown business districts. In January, the focus will be on the changing face of business, diversity in ownership. By the way, we welcome live audiences in the studio for all these programs. You can participate in Q&A and watch a live television show being made any Monday night. Just make reservations at wvia.org/events.
WVI is currently working on another new initiative, a plan to highlight some of our region's manufacturing success stories in a television series that might be called Made in NEPA or something like that. We're starting with the amazing story of Noble Biomaterials in Scranton. You know about them? They developed silver fiber technology to become a multinational supplier of medical components and antimicrobial products in the U.S. military and healthcare industry. WVI is not so much a direct service provider, as are so many others in this room. We are a storyteller, and we feel we can amplify your good work by sharing your stories, particularly success stories. I'm impressed already this morning by the idea of telling the story of how Camden, New Jersey empowers neighbors to be better neighbors, and why can't it be done here? That's the kind of story we love to tell. We want to make a positive difference for our community. So I'm happy to speak today, but I'm really happy to listen and hear what you are doing. And I thank you for this opportunity. There are many more great stories to come. Thank you for the support that makes it all happen at WVIA. And we look forward to helping to build a brighter future for Scranton and this entire region that we call home. Thank you. No questions, fine with me. I'd save them for the people who are on the front lines. Thank you.
Just a comment, just a thank you. Thank you for highlighting all the workforce initiatives you're working on at WVIA and how you can kind of be a centralizer and all the differences going on with that. I think there's a lot more to come regionally in this area, so I think we'd all like to continue to work with the station in that regard. It's such an important area that we're all called to do so much more in.
There's a new energy at WVIA, and there's a terrific staff there, but there's a terrific new leader in Carla McCabe. So we have taken very seriously the challenge to be a convener for the region, and that's one of our obstacles. So Scranton is a very important city. It's the biggest city in our region, but it is a city in one of 22 counties that we serve, and we have to try to cover as many stories around the region as we can. So anything we can do to support this work and to tell these success stories, that's what we're all about. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Chris. We appreciate your insights and all the work that you're doing at WVIA. I'd like to next welcome up our friends from Maternal, Family, and Health Services. Maria Montoro Edwards, are you being joined as well by some of your colleagues? Or?
Colleagues are here, so I'll refer to them, but yeah, I'll
Perfect. So Maria Montoro Edwards, thanks for being with us.
I was worried about the steps. Grace is not the middle name. So good morning. I'm Dr. Maria Montoro Edwards. I'm President and CEO of Maternal and Family Health Services. I've been here about 2 years now, and it is an absolutely amazing organization, and I am delighted every day to come to work. I'm here with my colleagues, Dr. Julie Nardella, our Chief Clinical Officer, Shannon Hayward, who is our Chief Operations Officer, and Cindy Kennedy, who is Director of Community Impact and Partnerships, and you've probably seen her at various community functions and interagency programs. So the two topics I'm discussing today are the infrastructure improvements and the community pride. So a project that we're doing right now is called a maternity medical home model. And we are doing an extensive expansion and renovation of our Circle of Care clinic, which is located currently on the corner of Pine and Madison Avenue. And we are expanding into a second floor of an old silk mill in South Scranton, if you're familiar with where McDonald's and Crown Chicken are. We'll certainly have access to food. So we'll have a 14,000 square foot area there that will be highly visible. And what's really exciting about that is that we're working towards a real integration of care. One of the challenges that we find is that the clients come in and they don't know all of the things that they may be eligible for. So we're working toward true integration so that every client that comes in, we can assess their needs and direct them to the right program within Maternal and Family Health Services, so there's no wrong door. So we've been founded since in 1971. We serve over 90,000 individuals annually. We are in 17 counties of Pennsylvania, the largest provider of WIC. We are in 15 counties for reproductive health, and we are in 4 counties and parts of 2 other for the Nurse Family Partnership Program. And our reproductive health program, we have 23 contractors in these 15 counties, so we are responsible for birth control, long-acting reversible contraceptives, cancer screenings, and we work with a lot of partner agencies. We really believe in the new location that we'll be at in Scranton. It'll be a much more visible location, and I think that's going to be very important for young women in the Scranton area. So they'll know where they can go for well women care, long-acting reversible contraceptives, and so they can make their educational priorities a reality. So some of the barriers and challenges that our organization faces, I mentioned before the low reimbursements for maternity care. We're one of 2 agencies in Pennsylvania that are freestanding Healthy Beginnings Plus maternity providers. Others are a federally qualified healthcare center or affiliated with a hospital, and they get a higher level of reimbursement. So if it were not for the generosity of our local foundations, we would not be able to close the gap and provide the high level of quality care. Our maternity clients, and I think I'm right about that, Julie, they're about 90% high, okay, 90% high risk. And our maternity numbers are up about 25% over last year. So we're seeing a significant increase. And these are the clients that come into perhaps an OBGYN and are considered non-compliant. Well, it's not that they're non-compliant. They have a transportation barrier. They have no family supports to watch the children while they need to go to an appointment. They may not be able to come during the daily hours of a typical medical practice. So these are the clients that are they're our main focus. And so it costs more to provide this level of care. And so the additional reimbursements would be very helpful to help us to sustain that service line. Some of the other barriers and challenges we're facing, as I mentioned before, the rigid Pennsylvania restrictions on behavioral health care. Our clients need access to high-quality mental and behavioral health care. Postpartum depression and services after infant loss are extraordinarily important. And we've had to do several workarounds to be able to provide this care. So fortunately, we have some funding right now through external grants, and we're partnering with Scranton Counseling Center to have embedded social workers, their employees at our location, to provide this high-level, high-quality postpartum depression and anxiety care. We're adopting a national model called Moving Beyond Depression, and I think this will be critically important to Scranton women. Big challenge for us is recruiting talented and qualified staff. We are limited by the medical services we could provide, by the staff that we're able to hire, and we can't compete with the Geislingers of the world in terms of salary. So we have made an organizational decision to address these salaries and to raise our rates, but we're still having a terrible time hiring nurse practitioners, qualified nurse practitioners with a women's health focus. And in our Hazleton site, we are actually facing a nursing crisis there in terms of being able to provide care. We've also experienced in the last year cuts in Title X funding, which is our program that enables us to provide family planning and reproductive health services. So in this world of change with the Roe v. Wade decision and the post-Dobbs decision, we've had a $300,000 cut in our reproductive health service line. And that's across the country. Everyone had a cut. But it makes it very difficult to expand services when you're experiencing a cut. You might know that there is no access to Planned Parenthood in Scranton anymore. There is a facility in Wilkes-Barre, there's an entity in Stroudsburg, but there is nothing in Scranton. So Maternal and Family Health Services is that provider. And we will have a much more visible location when we are in the South Scranton area, right on a bus route. So some of the barriers that our clientele face are echoes of what we've heard here today. We have a lack of affordable childcare. It is so difficult for clients to be able to get to appointments without childcare. We would love at some point to be able to provide some sort of care on site so that our pregnant and parenting moms can have their appointment in peace. Language barriers continue to be a challenge. Not telling anyone they don't know the dozens of languages that are spoken in Scranton. We rely on something called Language Line, but hiring bilingual providers is definitely a challenge. Mentioned the lack of health supports and long waiting times. The domestic violence issue never goes away. Lack of affordable housing and housing that is family friendly definitely is a challenge for our clients, as is food insecurity and lack of familial supports. Our Nurse Family Partnership Program helps with those family supports, but there are so many pregnant and parenting moms that do not have those supports at home. So the primary needs of our clientele, oral health care it became very evident that oral health care was going to be a very big challenge for our clients. And we are going to be offering oral health care in our new location. Not full service, not root canals, not extractions, but we will be able to offer for every pregnant and parenting mom and the children who come in through the WIC program access to screenings and cleanings and fluoride, and I think that that's going to have a real impact on the oral health of our clients, because poor oral health can lead to early term births. So what do we need to have in our sector for some systematic change? As I mentioned before, it would be very, very helpful if we were to have more advocacy on the state level to help address some of the issues that make it much more challenging in Scranton to receive the services that our clients need. So some restrictions might be lifted in the behavioral health piece, that more types of professionals can provide mental health care, and also to help access for the higher reimbursement rates. Okay, I'm at 5 minutes, so thank you. Yes.
Just quick question, the reimbursement rates, does that start at the federal level or is that state dictated?
So it is at the federal level, but Julie, as I understand too, the state makes decisions in the reimbursements as well. Sure, we have managed care organizations in Pennsylvania, and they can set their rates, and so that it is competitive in a sense, but some pay at the medical assistance rate, some pay 10% above, some pay a little bit more above that, and it just makes it, for what we might get $17 for, another entity that's accepting private insurance might get $100. So that makes it, you really have to cut the expenses. All right, thank you. I also brought handouts for with a little bit more on our presentation or our new location. So if anybody is interested, I'll leave them on the table over there.
Can I ask another question? And I want to open this up to everybody in the room. So obviously workforce and bringing in qualified professionals is a huge challenge. What supports, I guess, do the nonprofits need in order to capacity build? Because I think that that's a key piece of it is if we're not finding qualified individuals in the area, how are we bringing people in with all of the challenges?
Yeah, so there's a couple things that we can do there. One is pipeline programs. We talked about the RISE program. It would be wonderful to be able to have a pipeline program to get nurses, starting with our clients. We serve low-income women. They need to have a pathway to a family-sustaining career, and getting them into a pipeline program for nursing education, into the LPN, and then perhaps RN, and then maybe, CRNP at one point, So that would be critically important. And also, the more loan forgiveness so that individuals who are healthcare professionals who are graduating with high loans, especially nurses, that there would be some opportunities to help them to meet those payments. So I would love to see a collaboration locally. We submitted a grant to the Health Resources Services Administration last year. They got good scores, but wasn't funded to create that kind of pipeline program and work with Lackawanna College and Northampton Community College and Luzerne Community College to get our clients into those 2- and 3-year programs.
So I think one issue across our whole area is transportation and getting access to these resources. For your organization in particular, what are some of these barriers to transportation that you see with your clients?
So actually, I'm going to kick that over to Shannon because some of our sites are rural, and there's also it may be on a bus route, but it's 6 blocks from where the bus drops you off.
Yeah. Hello, everyone. Yeah, that's exactly right. The issue we have is our services need to be delivered in person for the most part. So we need people to come in person to our locations and to more access points because of the cost of the brick and mortar locations and the staffing. So we're not in all the places we could be, which is helpful when we're able to work with partners and co-locate. But getting people to those locations and then they missed the appointments because they needed to rely on a family member for the ride, they weren't able to get a bus. These are all the concerns that then they don't have the benefits they need. They're not getting the appointments they need to have a healthy pregnancy. So that's the main concern when we queried our staff on what they wanted us to bring, transportation concerns of people getting the care they need.
Thank you. Next up, we'll hear from Megan Loftus with the Friends of the Poor. Good morning. Again, my name is Megan Loftus. I work for Friends of the Poor. We are a nonprofit founded in 1986 with a basic mission to ease the burden of living in poverty and enhance the quality of life for anyone living in low to moderate income communities. So in English, that means that we provide emergency service, furniture, home goods, utility assistance, and then our model is that we are located in the Scranton housing developments, as well as several other locations, but we try to assist the individuals that are living in housing with some of the services that maybe they don't have access to because of transportation or other resource barriers. So we also have children's programming, summer camps, social activities, holiday giveaways, holiday meals, things like that. I'm thinking most of you are probably familiar with us. We were originally founded by Sister Adrienne Barrett, and then Sister Mary Alice Jacquinot took over, and then Sister Ann Walsh, and now me, who is not a sister and severely underqualified to talk about that part. So I wanted to touch on some of the issues that our organization faces. One of the biggest is the rapid growth we've experienced. So I came on board in 2017, and at that point we served about 40 to 45,000 people a year, duplicated about 14 to 15,000 unique individuals. Now we're serving well over 100,000 individuals a year duplicated, and somewhere around 20 to 25,000 unique individuals. Some of that is due to a little bit better reporting, but most of it's due to the increase in need. And so trying to expand our capacity to meet that increased need is really difficult for us. We have some really long waiting lists for everything except our pantries because they're just, walk in and get your service right there. But some of our pantries, like our Jackson Terrace pantry, is limited in space and it serves 120 families a day average. So that's not a busy day or a slow day, but just a normal Tuesday. So food, trying to keep up with the cost of food, the cost of providing the services, but also having the individuals needed to provide those services, having enough hands. We used to be entirely volunteer run, and a lot of the sisters were full-time volunteers. The congregation is aging. We don't have as many sisters. We have hired quite a few individuals to kind of try to fill some of that gap, but right now we're only a staff of 9, and we're serving 120,000. So we're really run thin. And I think that part of the barrier in that is explaining in some of our funding requests and applications that salaries and fringe benefits are not entirely overhead. And it's not that you are not spending money on programming. Those staff are entirely program staff. And so justifying the increase that you need and the additional staff is one thing that we're trying to educate in general for donors and funders, that we need more hands to be able to meet that need. And while more money for purchasing food is wonderful because we always need it, we still need that administrative piece to be able to have the hands to give out the food. Because it's not helpful to have a truck with no food in it or a truck filled with food but no driver. And moving along those lines, the biggest issues that our clients face is what other people had already mentioned with childcare and transportation. There's a lot of accessing living wages with certain jobs, but you can't get any sort of job if you don't have childcare, but you can't get into childcare unless you have the money to start it, and you can't get to work or get to childcare unless you have transportation. Our public system stops at 7 o'clock, so you can't even do second shift or third shift. It's really difficult to get from this county to Luzerne to work at any of the warehousing positions. So it's kind of, the barriers are all intertwined, and it's the systemic change that's needed is not to just address one focus area, but figure out a way to address them all simultaneously. And so while we don't all have millions of dollars to put into that, I think the focus that we are most interested in is taking some target populations and trying to provide those wraparound services and figure out what's working and what's not, and then move forward and apply that to other populations as we move forward. So that's one of our focus areas, and what we're trying to do with some of the families and the individuals that we have been working with for years is, really full wraparound case management, focus first on getting child care or transportation, and then focus on child care, then focus on the job, and kind of work all the way through that. In terms of what we need for systemic change, I think a lot of it has to do with collaboration. Because of the transportation barriers, a lot of our agencies provide similar services to some extent. So while we focus largely on food, there are several other agencies that focus largely on other areas but still have a food pantry. And so that's still sucking resources into that food pantry because they have to stock it and staff it and report and all of those things. And so if we can collaborate a little bit better and provide some of those services for each other, I think that would be easier and make things smoother for our consumers, because that way the requirement of what we're expecting from those consumers is the same across the board. So they know that if they're coming to get food at Friends of the Poor or they're going to another agency, they're going to have to provide the same information rather than showing up to one agency and not having the information they need and not able to get food. An example is for the Christmas toy giveaway this year. Friends of the Poor has been collaborating with Catholic Social Services for a few years. This year, we're now also collaborating with the Catherine McCauley Center. So we have our event and they have theirs, but coming together on tomorrow, the 7th, we will provide toys from the 3 agencies to 1,711 kids. And then anyone who couldn't pre-register or who had hit that, when we had hit that limit, wasn't able to, will then come on the 21st to the Catherine McCauley Center, where we will be continuing to give out toys to families there. We'll use whatever we may have left over from tomorrow, and then everything we continue to fundraise in the long run. So we're going to be able to serve a lot more people and also reduce our administrative costs because of that. So I guess my main points were, sorry, now I got the 2-minute warning and I'm panicking. So main points were, I know that you know what the barriers are, but in terms of attacking them and trying to make systemic change, we need to focus on multiple avenues at once. And so to make that affordable, I think we prioritize different populations. And then we also need to make it easier and more favorable for nonprofits to want to collaborate with one another and able to share some of those administrative costs and provide services more cost effectively. I'm done.
Megan, thank you. Can you highlight a little bit about just maybe where you could see opportunities for shared investments, for shared administrative investments that foundations or other funders could invest in? So there could be enhanced collaboration, in terms of creating support for operational needs.
Sure. Krista, can I use you as an example? Okay. So Friends of the Poor has 17 food pantries throughout Lackawanna County, and Catherine McCauley has 1. And so when Krista and I were speaking, the food pantry is very difficult for them to keep running smoothly because they have, their caseworkers are being pulled in so many directions with the other needs of their consumers. And so if there was a way that, just working out the steps that it takes to kind of formalize that sort of partnership, and then continuing to provide technical assistance and continuation of funding while we work through that partnership and address some of those bumps and barriers, potentially Friends of the Poor could take over their food pantry and provide those services to their consumers, and then that frees up their time to turn around and assist some of our consumers with housing or other issues that other areas that we don't directly have. You want to jump in?
Yeah, I'll tag off of that too. I think there's opportunity for shared staff in some capacities too. So Catherine McCauley Center is small. We have 17 staff members. Something that we struggle with is maintenance and hiring staff, especially when we're looking to expand on part-time. if other nonprofits who have similar needs, maybe it could be workforce development, and also funding a full-time position for somebody that would serve the needs of multiple agencies. I think kind of some of those supported positions could be another way of collaboration and increasing administrative efficiency.
Absolutely, and I think that we often, we're trying to be as responsible with our funding and our limited resources as we can, so we try part-time positions, which end up not being helpful to the agency and also not just to the people that we're hiring, because that's not providing a living wage. So if we kind of collaborate on that and provide higher salaries, living wage with benefits. The other thing that I want to mention is when we're hiring staff, if we could have more hands. I mean, there are a lot of private entities that have a ton of staff. And I think even in the government sector, there are a lot of positions. In the nonprofit world, you try to get by on bare bones, but you can't provide those extra benefits that entice someone to work in this field that is emotionally and physically and psychologically exhausting if you're running bare bones and you're running people ragged 24/7. So if we all had more staff and it wasn't so stressful 365 days a year, we could offer benefits of, like flex scheduling or a little bit more PTO time, or here's a meditation room for you to take 5 minutes and somebody's not calling you or saying, this consumer has an emergency, get out here right now. Most of us don't eat lunch, don't go to the bathroom more than twice a day, work 24/7. My 2-year-old actually takes my phone and throws it and says, Mama, stop working a lot. So I think that the fact we're all used to it being nonstop 24/7. The new people who are coming in and graduating don't want to do that. And I've had a lot of conversations with some of our newer staff, like, I don't care that you work till 5:30. You've never gotten out before 5:30, but that's just not the mindset of the people that we're recruiting and trying to hire now. So we have to figure out a way to provide such a flexible environment so that they're okay with making the salaries that they're making and working, a little past end time when they can, and not just kind of force that environment on them and then have them leave in a year and have us have to rehire everyone. The one other suggestion or idea we had that Friends of the Poor, Breadbasket, and CHOP talked about is that we all need translation services. We all see quite a lot of people who speak different languages. We're trying to use Language Line, we're trying to use Propio, Google Translate, anything we can, but it doesn't provide a dignified experience and it doesn't provide good translation. But none of us can afford a full-time person and sustain that. So what we were hoping is that we could hire somebody full-time amongst the 3 agencies and share that person. And so, say one person would hire them and the other 2 would reimburse for a portion of it. But again, that would be something that is scary for a board or a nonprofit because there's no income generating off that. Most of what we do doesn't generate income. So figuring out how that's sustainable in the long term. But the primary goal, again, is a more dignified experience because Scranton is diversifying slowly but surely.
Megan, just real quick, and not trying to plug one of our programs, but I think it's important to mention that I think our executive and residence program that provides capacity building support and consultant support might be a great fit for the work that you're trying to do, where you're trying to collaborate and bring together, like, how do we get the 2, Krista's pantry at Catherine McCauley Center underneath the auspices of Friends of the Poor in a way that works for everybody. I think a consultant who has experience in this might be able to help, and that is something that the foundation does cover. So I would highly recommend you apply for that, and I mention it in this instead of just coming to you on the side, so people know that we do have that type of funding available. Right now we're limited; it's capped at $5,000. Now, hopefully, $5,000 is enough to get all of it worked out, and that's to us a good use of our dollars. But I think you've also brought up a really important point of as funders, do we help support, as you mentioned, translation services? Maybe a translator that works across the region. Maintenance, I never thought of that, and so I think that's such an important thing to think about. That's something that we can do. So I appreciate you bringing that up. I would encourage you and anybody else who has this type of capacity building need to look at our executive in residence as a potential opportunity for you to get the wheels rolling on that. You can get the consultant support you need to make that happen. So.
Another plug, we're already in the executive in residence program for our capacity building to help me manage the rapid growth. But I will apply for a second.
You can.
Okay.
You're not limited to the one. So especially when something is collaborative, maybe Krista wants to apply if you felt like whatever. But the point is that's fine. If you want to have both, then have both.
She's more likable. We'll go that way.
Thank you for plugging the diversity piece. I think that's very, very huge. I want to go back to, because I've heard it through several of the individuals today, the idea of what we pay staff in nonprofits and the actual compassion trauma that they face and what they actually get for benefits. If you could talk a little bit more in detail about that, because I don't think people truly understand that you're working, I'm going to guess, minimum 60 hours a week, but probably some weeks 80. And you probably don't get a good salary, and you're at the top of the chain. Can we explain what those day-to-day program people are getting and what the benefits are, other than their own stubborn intuition to change the world?
Sure. So when I came on in 2017, I was the first paid employee of the agency. And so it was very difficult to have the board understand, and we are a sponsored ministry, so the congregation has reserved powers over us. So they are mostly making sure with those reserved powers that we're spending our money wisely and in line with our value set. But the board makes the other decisions. So I came on, the salary wasn't great. I needed to get out of where I was because I wasn't happy, and that this was going to make me happy. And I was young, wasn't married, didn't have kids, was just paying my student loans basically. So it was okay. I didn't have benefits for several years. When I got married, I had my husband's benefits, and then I finally said, we're never going to get anybody if we don't have a benefits package. It's just not going to happen. And so we started a benefits package that I wouldn't say it's top tier. I mean, it's not, my husband's a state trooper, and so his benefits are extraordinary. So we're not there. We're not, paying nothing and having a $5 copay. But we at Friends of the Poor pay 100% of the benefit cost for our staff. If they have any dependents, they have to pay that premium, but we will pay it for our staff. Then we also have a buy up option that they can pay into if they prefer a gold level, I think is what it's called, plan instead of the silver that we're at. We just been working with Krista and helping me kind of navigate this growth, reestablish the structure of our agency, and started with different levels. So we have coordinator, manager, director, CEO, and that determines our wage threshold. Sorry, I'm having a mini stroke. But that kind of helps it determine it more. We did have a hard time in recruiting. A lot of the individuals that I recruited for, or that I interviewed for certain positions, wanted a higher salary than I make, and it just isn't something that we can afford. So I know we have to increase our salaries, but that's the biggest hold back, is because when you're filing a 990, people are looking at salaries. They're not necessarily seeing that of my staff, 1.5 of us are fully management services. Everybody else is more than half to 100% program staff. And so those are things that are needed to run the program. It's not really that much overhead, but it's also completely unjust to ask somebody to serve and assist consumers and then go home and have the same issues they're facing, that their utilities are going to be shut off, they don't have food, and they're not living in decent and accessible and sustainable housing. So the last living wage study really threw me, because I didn't expect the living wage to be so high, which means we have quite a lot of room to make up and to increase our salaries. So, if there was any benefactor that wanted to throw us all money to start endowments and, increase our salaries, that would be great. But I think the best thing that we can do is, if we're going to be around this lower wage, we have to increase our benefits to be attractive to people that have other personal commitments and things that they want to be able to, work flexible schedules. We do have the public service loan forgiveness, be able to do, maybe some sort of childcare subsidy, help with different things like that, especially this year. So this whole year, I've been a single parent as my husband's deployed. I'm running this agency and I'm in school full-time. I'm finishing up my doctorate in the spring. So I had zero room for error anywhere, and not a lot of time to sleep. And I really don't make a lot, but I love what I do. And so I'm one of the people that Corin just mentioned that's probably slightly mentally ill and just enjoys this. But I was also, at the same time, recruited by 2 other private entity agencies to double my salary, and I turned them down. I would never expect my staff or anyone else to do that. Again, I think there's something wrong with me that I did, but I love what I do and I don't want to go anywhere. And so we're never going to be able to compete with that doubling, so we have to come back in. Like, I like the flexibility that I have. I like that, when my son is really, really sick, it's not that there aren't things that I need to be doing, but if I have to stay home that day and work from home, it's not the end of the world. My old job, if I did that, you had to take a PTO day and you were still expected to be doing things while you were home. So adding that flexibility, being understanding and compassionate, I think is part of it, but we still have to increase salaries, and I think increasing staff size would give us more flexibility to say, yes, you could take a few hours off here and there, we're not going to count it towards your PTO, like you can work from home today, or you can work 12 to 8 instead of 8 to 4 or something like that. Corin got me on a rampage, sorry.
I knew I would.
I'm good? Okay. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you so much, Megan. Appreciate you being here. We're going to do one more speaker, and then we're going to take a short break to allow everybody the opportunity to use the restroom, grab another coffee, grab some breakfast. So one more speaker, and then we'll take a short break. So next up, we have Mari Maher-Gray from the NEPA Youth Shelter. Thank you so much for being with us this morning.
All right, can you see me? Sit down, I tiptoe. I'm used to a little box sometimes, but okay. Good morning, everybody. I'm Maureen Maher-Gray from the Executive Director and founder of the NEPA Youth Shelter. Our mission is to provide quality emergency services for teens ages 18 to 21 in the NEPA region. I currently run a rapid rehousing program for individual teens ages 18 to 21 in which we provide financial assistance and a life skills coach for the teen for up to 1 year. We have been working on a plan for an emergency shelter as well. However, there have been some obstacles that have been difficult to overcome, but we are continuing on that path. I'm speaking today about the affordable and decent housing in our area. There are many aspects to this topic. I'm going to try to keep it limited, though. For our clients, there's usually 3 immediate impediments to housing. They have no birth certificate, they have no social security card, and therefore no photo ID. We put teens in hotels for several days while we gather the first 2 items so that we can get the 3rd item. They need an ID for both getting a job and renting an apartment. Another obstacle that our teens face is the lack of a credit score. Many landlords check credit scores. Fortunately, most of our teens have never had a credit card, so they have no score, and they are not behind the 8 ball with a bad credit score. So part of our program is to help them build good credit through their relationship with us. They sign their leases and they put their names on the utilities, which is the basis of a good foundation for credit building. The biggest obstacles our clients face is finding a decent, clean, modern apartment that they can afford on their own when their time with us has ended. We can put them into an apartment for $1,200 a month, sure, but they can't afford that when they only make $10 or $12 or $14 an hour. Our clients need apartments that run between $600 and $800 a month, that are not decrepit, bug-infested, have saggy floors, knob and tube wiring. They do need energy efficient appliances, modern plumbing and heating, insulated walls, smoke detectors, and carbon monoxide detectors. Other nonprofits who've tried to create low income housing have had pushback from neighbors who fear those people. No one wants to create community animosity with our fellow citizens, so opportunities for low-income housing don't go any further. Many nonprofits are looking for housing for their clients. We're not the only ones. A collaboration among nonprofits and with the city and the county could push forward more housing options. Perhaps the multifamily properties that are on the tax lists could be offered to nonprofits for $1. That's a little much. And there are available grants that could be made available to the nonprofits to be able to rehab those facilities into affordable housing across the city and county. Another suggestion would be that developers, both local and out-of-town people, should voluntarily include at least 10 to 20% low-rent apartments when they redevelop a property. Looking at all the beautiful buildings downtown that have been redeveloped, none of them offer an apartment below $1,000 a month. And if they did, the credit scores of low and moderate applicants would exclude them from eligibility. Let's look at the Electric City building and work with Fidelity Bank to create affordable housing in the upper floors. Let's look at the ugly concrete shell on the corner of Capouse and Olive Street and work with the landowner to create housing. Let's ask, and I'll name names, Mr. Basalia to include low-income housing in his 17-story apartment building he's going up on Mulberry Street. These are just a few ideas, and there are more opportunities out there waiting to be identified. That concludes my portion. Any questions?
Thank you. In a lot of our conversations, in terms of the housing sphere, equitable housing, the concept of mixed-use housing and how other regions have looked at regulations for that comes up. So that's interesting that you brought that up. I'm not sure at where we are in terms of that as a region or in terms of zoning laws, but is that something that comes up commonly within the discussions within those working in housing?
Yeah, it's a multi-pronged conversation. It's neighborhoods don't want those people in their neighborhood, so they push back. And everybody wants to remodel or refurbish these beautiful buildings, which is great. And everybody wants to make a profit. And we're not saying that you shouldn't make a profit when you remodel, but you're taking away housing that had been for that population whose services are downtown. Their medical services, their mental health services, the bus hub is down there. And when you take those away from low and moderate income people, there's no place else to go that has that combination of services. And finding something affordable, it's just nearly impossible. When we had our first homeless client in December 2019, and we got a 2-bedroom apartment in Westside for $650. That was really nice. Now our clients, the minimum we're paying is $850, and as we moved her stuff in, we found bug traps all over the place. And so now she's like, ooh, and I'm like, but there's nothing else out there, and that's after 27 attempts at getting an apartment. We have to be thoughtful. Everybody has to be thoughtful about how we develop our housing and not destroy it's like destroying the environment, right? We can tear down the rainforest, but then we've taken away our oxygen and an ecosystem for animals and bugs and things like that. It's the same thing for humans. You take away that housing, that core of housing, and you take away their ability to survive, really. For many people, survive. And some people do thrive, but it's very difficult, and we're trying to help our clients survive and thrive, to become good citizens in our city. But if they can't afford their rent once we finish helping them, then we're doing no good.
And so I know, at least in terms of our internal team, some of the conversations that have come up is, can the foundation in any way play a role in, helping to get any of the developers to the table for this conversation? I know it's not an easy question. I know it's not an easy thing to do. I'm not sure if we have a role in it, but it certainly has come up more than one occasion, so I put that out there for those that know a lot more about the issue than I do, other than what we're working on, because I know it's something that in other regions it is being done or it has been done. So I put that out there as a question.
And that's why I suggest the properties that are on the tax sale lists, because there are lots of multifamilies on that list that many nonprofits could use efficiently and effectively. It would take some money to probably rehab them. I know I've looked at several where you can see the ceiling has fallen in, or the roof is partially missing. I mean, so you need those funds to rehabilitate those buildings. But if you can rehabilitate a 4-unit or even a 3-unit, that's maybe 3 or 4 families you can get a decent housing, right? I mean, we're not going to have marble countertops and a spaghetti pot filler and slate floors, right? I mean, we don't have the money for that, but we want decent housing, and that's all we're asking for is the opportunity to create those things for not only our clients but for other people's clients, and that's something I think we could all collaborate on. So, hi, Ryan.
How are you?
I'm fine. How are you?
Laura, I think you're on to something, that community foundations have an opportunity to shift the perspective of the other people as you're describing as the untapped potential. Here anymore, but we don't have enough people to fill the workforce. We don't have enough trained people. So if we can, we need all the bodies.
Mm-hmm.
We need all the bodies that are willing, able to work, and are able to be skilled up to be in the positions that we have. So I think that there's like a perspective shift that has to happen, a cultural shift that has to happen to see everyone as an opportunity to work together to fill all the needs.
Right.
That's all I have.
Thanks, Ryan.
Since Laura looked over to our table, housing has always been one of the initiatives that we've been on our radar. I think after today, it's going to be even higher on our radar. And I will say the city has been a great partner in trying to figure out some of what you've suggested as well. So I welcome anybody to reach out to myself. I have my card here. That housing is an issue and a collaborative one. And I feel between, as Ryan had said, the foundation and the philanthropic side and the city and the government side, I think we can make great strides in the new year. So I thank everybody for bringing even things housing-wise. I know enough information to be deadly, but the small things that you're mentioning and Megan mentioned and other people mentioned that matter in housing, if you would. So thank you.
Thank you. Yeah.
There is a model that is just going to take place shortly in the city where we fund it with our home dollars, a portion of the project. So that some of the apartments would be low to moderate income eligible. We only receive about $600,000 a year from HUD for this. So, you know, therein lies the biggest problem, is acquiring enough funding. You know, maybe that is something that we could look to some of the nonprofits to help us get enough funding so we can have more of these projects where, you know, a portion of the building is low to moderate income, even a few apartments. And I was just in Syracuse with the mayor a couple months ago, and Syracuse actually legislated that the apartments downtown, the apartment buildings downtown, had to have a certain amount of low to moderate income apartments in the building.
The city I used to live in, Spokane, Washington, had the same thing. Yeah. They literally passed a law because it wasn't happening. Yeah.
Rochester,
A lot of cities do it, yeah, because downtown is the core.
So that goes to advocacy, right, Eileen? And how do we start that? Because it obviously just doesn't happen. You can't just wave your magic wand and have it become a policy. So how, I guess, can we as nonprofits, as collaborators, start that so the city can enact that, if you would?
Well, I think all of the voices coming together, right? You know, squeaky wheel gets the grease, so to elevate things. You know, the other problem that you didn't mention that we're seeing a lot is we've lost a lot of Section 8 housing in the city. Section 8 landlords that accepted Section 8 before, because they're looking at market rate. It ended with a lot of people trying to be evicted in order to be able to get the apartment and get it to market rate. I'm not sure of a method to work to try and counteract that. You know, hopefully the market resets itself enough that we could get more of that Section 8 back, but it doesn't seem like it's happening quickly.
No. Our first homeless client, the apartment we got in Westside for $650, this past summer, the landlord kicked him out and said that he was going to remodel the apartment He was kicked out, and it just came back on the market for $900. I'm looking at the pictures and like, there's nothing different here. There's nothing
Yeah, in our home
remodeled.
Our home rehab program, we're going to require, if they take money from us, require them to keep the rent at a reasonable rate for a period of 5 years.
Wonderful, wonderful. You know, if there's ever a grant opportunity where all of us can sign on, you know, get that big box going, I would be happy to sign on for something like that, you know, because like you said, squeaky wheels. And if several of us are signing on as potential recipients of a big grant, I'm happy to put my name on it. Anything else? Thank you all so very much. I appreciate it.
Thank you so much to our first round of speakers. We're going to take a 10-minute break, so we're going to come back. It's 10:19 now. We'll come back for 10:30. And if you are here to speak, if you could please check in with Frank. If you want to raise your hand, Frank, so you know where he is. Please check in with him so we know that you're here. But please help yourself to some coffee, some water, some of the breakfast. The restrooms, when you go out the door here, are down the hall to your right. So we'll reconvene for our next speaker at 10:30. Thanks so much.